Knossos is a super important and interesting archaeological site in Greece. It's the second most visited one in all of Greece, after the Acropolis in Athens, of course, and just in front of Delphi, which comes in third spot. But why is Knossos such an important place? Well, there are a few reasons. First of all, this is not a Greek site, it's a Minoan site, because in 2000 BC, which is when Knossos was built, the map of Greece looked very different. Mycenaeans, who are the ancestors of the Greeks, only controlled the mainland, while the islands were part of the so-called Minoan civilization, and Crete was their capital. The capital of the Mycenaeans being Mycenae, obviously, which is located 2 hours away from Athens. And yes, there is an organized day trip going there from Athens in case you want to visit the ruins. If you want to know more, I'll put a video up here once it's ready. Now, these two civilizations, so the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, they had this ambiguous relationship of like, we want to trade and learn from one another, but on the other hand, if I could conquer you and possess everything you possess, it wouldn't be such a bad thing either. And spoiler alert, Mycenaeans did eventually conquer the Minoans somewhere around 1400 BC, and that's why no one talks about the Minoans anymore. They disappeared more than 3,000 years ago. And so visiting the archaeological site of Knossos is discovering a whole new culture, completely different from everything you will have heard at the Greek archaeological sites. Now, while the Mycenaeans, so the early Greeks, were all about building huge walls and they were always ready for battle, Minoans were much more peaceful, much more focused on how can we improve our lives here, or how can we create a beautiful place, rather than continuously thinking on how to conquer the next piece of land like the Mycenaeans did. And that's why the Minoans are considered to be the first advanced European civilization to ever exist. So it's a pretty big deal. They were the first to have stuff like running water, bathtubs, toilets, sewage systems, heated floors, multi-story buildings, and the list goes on. I mean, this is really impressive stuff considering this was all 4,000 years ago. And maybe you won't be surprised to hear that the king of the Minoans was actually a queen. Women were in charge there. And so maybe that explains why it was such a peaceful and elegant civilization. It was ruled by women. And by the way, you can admire all their gorgeous jewelry and art at the Museum of Iraklio, which I'm going to talk about later in this video. Now, something else that makes Knossos such a famous and important site. The myth of the Minotaur guarding the labyrinth, I guess you've heard of it. Well, Knossos is that. It's the labyrinth. And the Minotaur beast, that's also kind of a true story, and you'll hear all about it at your guided tour in Knossos. It's super interesting. Now, of course, Knossos was never an actual labyrinth. It was a regular city, but Mycenaeans, so the early Greeks, apparently felt like you could get lost very easily in that Minoan town. And since it's the Greeks who wrote all these myths and not the Minoans, well, Knossos became known as the labyrinth. All right, now where is Knossos exactly located, and what guided tour do I recommend? Well, Knossos is here, 15 minutes by taxi away from the city of Iraklio, and the tour I recommend can be found by scanning this QR code or by clicking the link down below. The tour lasts around 1 hour and a half, and it includes the entrance ticket, so you don't have to book that separately. You can choose the maximum group size that you want, either 16 people or 8 people, and of course the smaller group size is a bit more expensive. And then you can choose your time slot, since they're running this tour multiple times a day. And then at the checkout you can also add transportation from your hotel if you want, but only if you're staying in Iraklio city. If you're somewhere else, you'll have to book a taxi on your own. Oh, and if you're coming on a cruise to Iraklio city, yes, you can also book this tour, because they do pick up people at the cruise port as well. Now, important, make sure to pack enough water for this tour, because water bottles at the entrance of the site are insanely overpriced, and since tap water is not drinkable in the Iraklio region, you can't refill your bottle with tap water the same way you would do it in Athens, for instance. So definitely have enough water with you. Now, if you want a private tour to have the guide for yourself, then this is the one I recommend, or again, the link down below. That one does not include transportation, so either you come by taxi or with your rental car. And speaking of rental cars, parking is very easy at Knossos. There's this huge parking lot, so if you are renting a car, you don't have to worry about parking. If you're on a budget and you don't want to spend money on the guide, you just want to visit the site on your own, then this is where you can book the entrance ticket online, because Knossos has the same issue as the Acropolis. If you want to get your paper ticket in person last minute, you might have to line up for like 1 hour. So definitely book it online ahead of time. But again, this is only if you want to visit the site on your own. If you're booking one of the guided tours I mentioned, you don't need to book the ticket separately. It's included in the package. And by the way, in case you didn't know, I'm a tour guide myself in Athens. And if you want to hire me, this is my Instagram page. Now, as mentioned earlier, there is a museum linked to this site, and all the things that were found during the excavations at Knossos or exhibited there at the museum. Some of the highlights are the 2 figurines of the so-called snake goddess, which we're not entirely sure what they represent, but it's probably fertility. Then there's the bull leaping fresco showing a boy doing a very acrobatic jump over a charging bull, which we know is one of the Minoans' favorite sports. Speaking of bulls, this here is my absolute favorite piece in the museum. It's this bull head, which I find so realistic and so majestic. And then there's the Festus disc, which features the Minoan alphabet and language called Linear A, which we still haven't deciphered, by the way, so we have no idea what their language sounded like, nor what's actually written on this disc. Maybe AI will help us decipher it. Who knows? Let's see. Here's the link to book the entrance ticket to the museum. And again, it is highly recommended you book it ahead of time. And if you want to hire a guide to explain what you're looking at the museum, then this is the guided tour I recommend, or again, down below. Now, what if you're staying in Chania instead of Iraklio? Can you still visit Knossos and the museum? Well, yes, there is a tour package for that. It takes 3 hours by bus to get to Knossos, where you'll have a 1.5-hour guided tour, and then they're going to bring you to Iraklio city, where you'll have some time to visit the museum and the city as well if you want, and then the bus takes you back to Chania. The link for that tour is over here. Now, Crete produces half the olive oil of the entirety of Greece. Half of the whole volume. So olives are a very, very big deal there, and that's why I would 100% recommend booking an olive oil tour of some sort when visiting Crete. This is the one I recommend if you're staying in Chania, and that's the one if you're staying in Iraklio. And there you go. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you in the next one. Bye.